You're ready.
Okay. Today I will be refuting Samantha's claim that human activity is the leading cause of global climate change. And her supporting claims were that Earth has suffered drastic changes that have come from climate change, that human activity has made greenhouse gases rise over time, causing climate change, and that the future of climate change shows that unrepairable damage will occur. And today I will be taking an opposite stance that human activity just merely contributes to climate change. It's not the leading cause. And I will do this by showing that Samantha's first claim is irrelevant because Earth has gone through many periods of climate change since Earth was created. Secondly, that contrary evidence exists that suggests that human activity has only slightly contributed to the rise of greenhouse gases and thus climate change. And that Samantha's third claim is again irrelevant, and that the future of global warming can actually be changed. So first and foremost, I'm going to point out the first statistic that Samantha brought up in her presentation that came from the Inquisition of climate science. And that statistic was that 97.4% of climatologists agree that human activity is the leading cause of climate change. But when you actually get down and find the data that was provided by the University of Illinois in the study, that 97.4% actually is 75 of 79 climatologists that responded to an otherwise 3,000 person response summary. So this data is non-representative and quite misleading when it's represented like that. Secondly, I'm going to make a quick definition between global warming and climate change. According to NASA, global warming is an increase over a long period of time in climate, whereas climate change is just any sort of increase or decrease. And this again is important so that we don't misunderstand the data. So the first claim that Earth has gone through many periods of climate change. Earth was created in a fiery eruption. Earth has gone through ice ages. We've been at the polar ends. This also has happened with and without human activity. So the claim that Earth is going to suffer drastically from humans is irrelevant because Earth has already gone through these giant climate changes without us. Secondly, her statement that greenhouse gas rise over time has caused climate change. I have a book that I got from the library called Opposing Viewpoints, Global Warming, and it actually says that there's no known connection between emission of carbon dioxide and a rise in temperature on Earth. Temperatures were rising pre-1940 before large global industrialization. They're still rising today after that. There's no known connection. Might happen, but as of now there's no known connection. And even if there were a connection, according to the same book, Opposing Viewpoints, the overwhelming majority, 97% of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere actually comes from nature, not mankind. So we do contribute a little bit, but most of it comes from nature, meaning that we might not be the leading cause. And similarly, there's 4 studies I found ranging from 2003 to 2013 that are from the same procon.org website that Samantha cited. And she cited that there was a 1.4 degree temperature, or 1.4 degree Fahrenheit temperature change over the last century, which is true, but when you put it in the scope of what that comes from, there's actually been a plus or minus 5 degree temperature change over the past 3,000 years. So yes, the Earth's temperature has generally risen, but it's nothing that we should worry about. It's gone up and down like that in the past 3,000 years. So stuff like this happens. Finally, the third claim is Samantha said that unrepairable damage will occur, but what she failed to see was that there are solutions provided by NASA today. From NASA, they have quoted in response to a question saying, what can we do to prevent climate change in the future? And they said The more you know about how Earth's climate works, the more you'll be able to help solve problems related to climate change, which is why my refutation is important today. If we know and we understand the facts without getting misled or without them being misrepresented, then we can, in fact, minimize climate change, whether or not human activity merely contributes, like I believe, or if it's as significant as misrepresented data shows. Thank you. Okay. 4 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, just start counting down at 5.
Okay.
Sorry,
No, you're fine.
I guess I didn't clarify
I
that.
caught that a little bit.
But
I had the timer, I was just thinking,
sorry.
but you're good.
I think we've got the same as 5. Sorry.
All right, Minna, it gets a little confusing because you basically remind us of the 3 points that the advocate presented, then you preview the 3 points that you're going to take, and then we get to the signpost of the supporting points, and it sounds like you've got a first response, and that's not really the first response. It's actually kind of a separate issue. Your first response comes after that. So you're over-labeling your claims. All right, so it's easier to say, here are the 3 claims they're making. Let me respond to them one at a time.
Okay.
All right, and then we'll go to that first point, and I'll give my response when I get to that particular point. It just gets confusing to have it in 2 different places. Now, your response on the statistic, the 97% statistic, is explained. I do think you want to give us a source on that, but it's explained pretty clearly, and I think the idea is that it's not nearly as unanimous as is being portrayed, and so the degree of certainty here is problematic. And your argument seems to be that there is a difference between global warming and climate change, and that climate change is a normal process on the planet, that we go up and down on a regular basis, and we've got a long history of those sorts of things happening. And as a consequence, there's less to be overwhelmingly concerned about than some of the folks who are worried about global warming seem to be implying. And I think that that's a reasonable argument to make, except that it only goes as far as saying those sorts of things. You know, over the years we started in fire, and then we've had ice ages, and it's been all over the planet and all that sort of thing. Okay, that's true, but like I said, the impact on human society, I think, needs to be argued about, and I think that that's part of what the advocate's argument is about. The idea that we're going to destroy the planet, I think that's, probably laughable. We'll destroy ourselves, that could happen. But the planet, it'll go on, we'll disappear, and it'll move on and exist. I think that that's not really the big worry. It's really, are we going to do something to screw ourselves up? Your second argument, kind of gives some discussion about whether or not the greenhouse gases are a significant contributor to, or CO2 is a significant contributor to that. The source citation that you have on that is Opposing Viewpoints. Opposing Viewpoints is like procon.org or any of those other sources. They are an aggregate site. They are not taking the position. They're quoting somebody. You want to be quoting the people that are in the article. So I know how Opposing Viewpoints works. There are articles in there on each side. You want to be quoting the article, not the publication in that particular situation, because then we could have a better assessment of whether or not that seems like it's a reasonable interpretation of what's going on there. The studies that you make a reference to, the number of studies that have found that there's a change, I mean, you're willing to accept that there's a change in the climate or the temperature over the last X number of years. I forget what the number was that you had, 100 years or something like that. But you say, but over the last 3,000 years, it's been plus or minus, 5 degrees in temperature. So, it's likely that these sorts of things are going to happen. The idea that it is unique because of industrial activity, because of the CO2 in the atmosphere, because of the number of the people that we have on the planet or the physical activities that we're going on. I think your argument here is that we don't have enough to be able to make that inference given the variation that is naturally occurring. That's probably the best way to phrase that argument. Excuse me. And then the third point seems to be that there are ways to moderate this and anticipate and make adjustments and changes. But all your evidence here says the more we know about this, the better able we are to respond. It doesn't really tell us what any of those responses would be, how effective they would be, how costly they would be, any of those sorts of things. So I think that that argument is a little underdeveloped. All right, thank you. Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Mark Dietzel. Gotta make sure we get the right mark there.
Wait. Oh, you mean to refute mine?
Well, it's your turn. I have your evaluation form.
Oh, I'm sorry, because I had like one of the last speeches
Well-
last time, so I thought I wasn't supposed to be ready until Wednesday. Or did I do something wrong?
Well,
Oh, only if you were, you only make other.
I'm sorry. That's my problem.
Let me take that back. I need the forms from people who are supposed to be speaking tonight. So it's okay. It's Katya?